Great. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OAG's latest webinar from wherever you're dialing in to listen to us today. Today, we're going to talk about Central Asia. It is the smallest region in aviation terms globally, but it is the fastest growing. So we thought it would be time to just take a look at what's going on in the market and understand a little bit more about this fascinating region. So to do that, we are delighted to be joined by two speakers to help us navigate that. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Deirdre Fulton, partner at MIDAS Aviation and long-term colleague of OAG, helping run these webinars. We're delighted to be joined by Dmitry Martynenko, Commercial Director at Samarkand International Airport, so right at the heart of this exciting, fast-growing region. Welcome, Dmitry. We're delighted to have you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Great, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. And as ever, John Grant, good morning. Welcome. Welcome back. It doesn't feel like a month since the last one.
It doesn't, does it? What a beautiful morning. Summer, spring, blue skies.
Oh, we're positive today.
Everything's going well in the aviation.
Oh, don't. It'll all change in an hour, John. It'll all change.
No better time.
Okay, so welcome to the panel. We, as I said, we're going to look at Central Asia. We're going to kind of dig in a little bit into some of the key country markets, namely Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, what's happening in terms of route growth and who's driving that growth, both in terms of how the market has evolved and what the landscape's like for airlines. Before we do that, and for those of you who join us regularly, we always like to take a look at what is happening globally in capacity terms, and keeping track of what's going on in the industry is a perpetual challenge, especially right now. This chart we show every time we do one of these. I was stealing my own thunder there with the next one. So what we're showing is just simply capacity going back to 24, which is the darker line. Last year, this is just total global capacity by month. And then the yellow line here is capacity for the current year. You can see clearly a dip at global level as a direct result of what's happening in the Middle East. The numbers are showing down 0.9% in April, but actually the biggest reduction is in international capacity. There's a little bit of timing of Easter, which sat in March this year and April last year, so that blurs things a little. And then if we look forward, the dotted line is where capacity is expected to be for the rest of the season. It feels a slightly aspirational schedule position for me.
It is. We're not going to hit that. You know, we're going to, at best, I think we will track 2025 because not just the direct issues in the Middle East, but also the subsequent impact in terms of availability of fuel, reductions in frequency, carriers having to adjust their networks, etc., etc. You just sense that certainly if you look forward for the next 6 to 8 weeks, we're going to at best be at 2025 capacity levels.
And I think this is very reminiscent of what we saw in the pandemic, where when there's a major crisis, the focus is on planning in the crisis. And we're still seeing that. And that kind of short-term picture of 4 to 6 weeks out is the focus rather than what's going to happen in the rest of the season. So I think the kind of cautious, experienced eye says, as you say, John, unlikely to be materialized, and it's not necessarily a reflection of optimism about what's coming. It's more the reality of short-term planning.
And for even if peace was declared in our time tomorrow, which I think is extremely unlikely, there are airlines out there who have not been on sale, or there's markets in which they've not been selling tickets for the last 2 months, and they've got to reprime their booking curves and revenue management. So, that capacity is going to come back quite slowly in some cases.
And that process kind of can't really get started, can it, for some of those carriers until there is peace.
And airlines are stuck between a rock and a hard place. They want to sell, they want to be out there marketing, and they want to be taking forward bookings. But to take a forward booking to then cancel it and have to give the passenger his money back isn't great PR, doesn't engender goodwill. It's just, it's a really difficult space for them to be in at this moment in time. Mm-hmm. And there's not many airlines who can take advantage of this. It's not as though there's alternate routings available for some markets.
Yeah, it's all quite marginal, isn't it? I think for balance, to sort of counter the potential perceived optimism that might be there, we just wanted to show you this, which is tracking capacity by week over the year to date. And this is just the percentage change versus the same week last year. So a more realistic picture, I think, around where we are. Domestic just sort of flat, but international capacity down just below 4% year on year.
One of the things this does, Deirdre, is at moments like this, we see how fragile some of the airlines are around the world, who have no control or limited control of their destiny. And we'll talk about fuel prices later. But, if you look in the US market, there is so much noise at the moment about Spirit and if Spirit's going to be able to survive and in what shape, etc. And all of the US airlines have a policy of not hedging their fuel price. And suddenly they're paying 40 to 50% more for fuel. And for some airlines, that's just about sustainable when you add an extra cost for a suitcase or another bag. But for those low-cost airlines whose margins are wafer thin, or in the case of Spirit, where you thought, at best you'd make a 7% net loss this year, then you're now looking at losses that are unsustainable, and creditors are beginning to wonder whether they need to get their investments out.
Yeah, and then
it's April. It's not February.
The uncertainty that creates, particularly at a time when everyone has less money in their pocket, and is uncertain about where costs are going to go. I think that landscape just creates more uncertainty, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And you look at Norse in the UK market, or in the European market, who've dropped a number of their traditional long-haul routes and are, quote, reassessing their strategic position. I mean, this is the language we normally hear in November, December.
In the winter. Yeah, absolutely.
And to hear this before the peak season,
I think for me, when I was looking at oil prices yesterday, this was just looking at going back to a month ago. That looks quite optimistic, doesn't it? Prices appear to be coming down, but actually, if you look back 12 months, this just really illustrates where we are and just how challenging this is for airlines, compounded by lack of supply and lack of availability. And I think we know the industry is resilient. We know that travel demand survives through huge crises. We've seen that. We've all lived through that. But it feels like the level of uncertainty that's in the market about the summer season. I had a conversation with my family the other day where I said, will we be able to get to our holiday destination by alternate means? It feels a bit like we're in one of those race across the world challenges, maybe, that we didn't quite sign up for.
Well, but if you can't get petrol for your car, you can always go buy a bus.
Electric. That's why we have electric cars. Anyway, that's a whole other story for a whole other day. But Yeah, I think.
Oh, let's get positive. Let's talk about.
Let's get positive. Things. I know. We gotta be realistic though about where the industry is and what's happening. I guess the interesting thing, Dmitry, from your perspective, obviously you're in this, market where growth has just gone wild, really, since post-pandemic. How is the market reacting to what's happening globally right now? Because you're not immune from that, are you?
Oh, sure, yes. I mean, of course, we are affected, and we have to be realistic of like what's happening on the market. And of course, we are affected because this is the global thing. And but me personally, I'm trying to stay optimistic because I mean, we have experienced shock after shock after shock since 2020, since COVID, and the market is certainly uncertain. There's a lot of uncertainty within the airlines when you speak with them, but we've been there. I mean, after COVID, so everyone's sort of used to it, and yes, it's just that we can't plan midterm here in Central Asia. It's so dynamic that you have to be flexible. You have to, find another market. So, or you have to speak with airline to move their capacity to somewhere else if one market is affected. So you speak with, you're looking for another sources. Yeah. So I'm trying to stay optimistic, and that it's still fragile for Central Asia. I mean, yes, we experience a lot of growth, but we will get to that within the webinar, that there are still a lot of structural problems and something that's that can't help us, can't let us plan midterm and be more confident. But let's stay optimistic.
I think that's the nature of emergent markets, isn't it?
Yes.
Where you get this incredible burst of growth, and we can think of lots of examples of markets where we've seen that. India is a different scale, but fantastic example of a market where there was a lot of turmoil in those emergent years, where fast growth happened, it contracted a bit, it grew fast again. There was instability in the airline market in terms of who the kind of dominant carriers were, and actually that process just takes time and is part of the evolution of the maturing of a market. And for context, as I said, Central Asia globally very, very small in comparison to other regions, just 33, just under 34 million seats in 2025, but actually experiencing that super fast double almost growth,
double-digit growth,
anywhere else.
There are inevitably in the development of an emergent market going to be bumps along the way. There will be airlines who emerge and just don't have the resources to survive. There will be routes where suddenly there is excessive competition and 3 or 4 airlines start operating, and eventually maybe 1 or 2 stay in that particular market. But the residue that they leave behind them is generally a larger market size, and a market where air travel has become a very acceptable means of getting around the world, and where diaspora are reconnecting and trade is building, and it's all ultimately positive. But inevitably there will be occasions when a bump occurs.
Yeah,
they still do in Europe.
Yeah, but now we see that this growth is normalizing. I mean, it's been pretty fast in recent years, since maybe 2017. But now we can see that this growth, and you will see that on the slide, for example, for Kazakhstan. So it's been double-digit growth, and it's flattened a little bit in the recent years.
Exactly that, Dmitry. I mean, if we look back, we sort of always like to have a mix of looking back in the long term and then doing some kind of short-term views. So going back to 2000, you can see that trajectory of steady, steady growth, a little bit faster on international in the 2010s, and then really right out of the pandemic, this kind of explosive growth. Now, that there were things that happened in the market. The outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war was a significant factor in terms of the interrelationship between Russia and the STAN countries. But really, it would be amazing to have that crystal ball and look forward as to how that trajectory is going to continue. When we break that down, this is just a snapshot looking at April capacity back in 2010, 2019, and then the last 2 years. Exactly that. We've seen the big chunk of growth in Kazakhstan happening. It's leveled off a bit. There's still a lot to go in Uzbekistan, and we'll talk a bit more about that. And really, these are the two big markets that are kind of driving growth. The others are smaller yet. Still, reasonable growth if we look just at the last 10 years average annual growth rates. But the big volumes are coming from these two big markets.
And very different types of growth, aren't they, Dmitry? I mean,
Oh yeah, yes.
When you look at Kazakhstan, a large proportion of that capacity is about domestic services.
Domestic, yes.
Yeah.
The inaccessibility, road journeys are very long and tedious. Whereas in Uzbekistan, domestic air travel.
I think if we show this, the geography just explains the size and volume of the domestic market, doesn't it?
Yeah. So you're seeing much more international growth, aren't you? Which is more exciting, and it's all about global trade and connectivity and all of these sort of things as much as anything else.
Yeah, and in Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is still the biggest Central Asian market in terms of passenger traffic, but the 60% of it is domestic. I mean, 60% of the share is domestic traffic, whilst Uzbekistan is more driven by 80% by international capacity. So, and actually, if you compare, for example, international traffic in Tashkent with Almaty, so it was a surprise for me that Tashkent international traffic is actually bigger than in Almaty.
I think an interesting point as well is that a lot of the international travel and capacity from Uzbekistan is not actually within the region you see in that map. It's actually further afield. So there's been a lot of growth to Turkey, huge amounts of growth to the Middle East, notwithstanding what's happening now. And China and India are beginning to develop. You've got all of those going on alongside the established Russian market that is still very strong, and airlines continue to add routes.
Yeah, I think I was just skipping ahead to this one to look at that. If we look at those international country markets, and this is just at regional level, you can see. So this obviously just shows how capacity is kind of distributed across regions. Now that includes Russia within Eastern and Central Europe, and Western Europe includes Turkey, Turkey. Northeast Asia is largely China, a little bit of South Korea, So you can, that sort of visually really shows you there's still a significant dependency on on Russia, and I think I guess the interesting thing is the current situation with the Middle East kind of exposes that dependency a little bit in terms of what was a super fast growing market, and was becoming, if we'd ranked this by capacity in 25, the UAE would be sitting in third position, but significant impact. The reality is, I think we all expect it'll come back, and that growth will return and recover. But it does, where capacity is as kind of fragmented across a range of markets. An event can have a significant impact on what was a fast-growing market.
I think one of the fascinating things about the Central Asian market, and I've been fortunate enough to go to Samarkand and do some work with Dmitry and some other people, is the characteristics of the traveller are, still there is the classic migrant worker flying back and forth who turns up at the airport at 10 hours before departure, because that's the only public transport available to them, and they're quite happily sit in the airport on the floor, make themselves comfortable and sit there for 8 or 9 hours. And then you have all of these, and at the same time, you've got these new emergent markets of young professionals who are traveling on business, and you've got the inbound tourism. It's a really vibrant market with very different reasons for travel.
It is.
And that's I think part of the fascination of what we're seeing there at the moment.
It is. I would agree on that. But Russia dependency is, I would say, still like a structural risk, because if you look at the Russian market since 2014, pretty much something is happening in there which affects capacity and affects the Russian market. So it's very unstable. So, for example, Kazakhstan's share of Russia, I think, is around 20%. Uzbekistan is around 40%, and Tajikistan is enormous 80% dependency on Russian market. And when in what was it, 2024 or 2025, Russia got really strict rules on labor traffic coming to Russia. So the Tajikistan airport traffic just decreased 2 years in a row, I think. So, and this is one of the things where we have to look and diversify markets. I mean, obviously, you can't just tell people that, okay, and there are historical ties, and it's the same language, because most of the Uzbeks at least understand or speak Russian. So, but and you cannot tell those people that, okay, now you go and look for work in China, for example, because this is just going to be too difficult for them. But for those emerging markets like business travel and leisure tourists, obviously there are a lot of markets to explore for Central Asia still, and that's what we're trying to do now.
And of course, you've got this sort of interesting situation where you've got the world's two fastest growing markets, China and India, literally on your doorsteps, haven't you? The potential there is significant, notwithstanding a couple of geopolitical issues, like you can't fly over Pakistan airspace at the moment if you're an Indian airline, etc., etc. But the opportunities.
I think I was slightly surprised, and I can't quite articulate why, to see India in the top 10 international country markets.
I think it's about 4th or 5th, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It's just like it's classic trading. Don't forget, Dmitry is sitting on the Silk Road. I mean, that's historic. That's been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, and that That is
exactly.
why the Indians are going there. They're traders.
Yeah. That's very true. I think the interesting thing is the extent to which you get this kind of circularity of, the market is obviously going through
Liberalization,
liberalization,
yeah.
and that is then enabling a whole bunch of things to happen. You've also got fast growing population. Uzbekistan, of course, is the largest market there, isn't it? And if you look at those kind of, I think 36, almost 36.5 million population. Kazakhstan's about 20 million. But you've also got, so the economic growth that's happening in the region, GDP growth is high, 6% last year. And it's going to slow a little bit this year, but still, 5% GDP growth is quite punchy. If we looked back, I looked back to 2018, and GDP per capita was under just around $1,500. It's more than doubled in the last 6 years. So upwards of $3,000. And there's kind of a threshold about
2,800 is the AirAsia claim to. That's when low cost markets can really kick in.
And then sorry, carry on.
I think it's fascinating. I mean, the first time I went to Uzbekistan and Central Asia was probably about 5 years ago, and I arrived in Tashkent on a very grey 6 o'clock Tuesday morning, and you could see that there was some economic growth and things were happening. Every time you go back, there is a significant move forward in terms of the look and the feel of the city, and the same in Samarkand. And it's, it is about a younger population who've got disposable income, but not only disposable income, but have now got access to credit, where previously credit wasn't possible. So they're now using credit cards. Online shopping is becoming much more prevalent in the marketplace. People are, digitized in everything that they do.
People's mindset is changing.
Yeah,
you can see that.
Yeah, I mean, I met the equivalent of Amazon in Uzbekistan, and their operation. I mean, they are bringing stuff in from China, breaking it down, and moving it around the whole of Central Asia within 24 hours. And I mean, that's phenomenal to be able to do that in such a very quick market, and it's going to continue. You can't see it stopping.
Yeah, the government is doing amazing job, I would say, both in Kazakhstan and in Uzbekistan. And one of the reasons of a quick rebound from COVID, that it started pretty much pre-COVID, like the active phase when government said, okay, we will now I am doing it, liberalize, and we will increase disposable income, and we will change our mindset, and there's going to be a new Uzbekistan. So it just started, and then there's COVID, so it got delayed. But once the COVID ended, it just popped up instantly with a very fast pace.
Yeah, you really are sitting on one of the hottest markets in the world, I think, Dmitry.
Yeah, and it's a big pleasure to experience it with your, to be here and now.
The challenge is every year your management team will want a bit more growth, and a bit more growth. So suddenly your 11% growth becomes 15, and then it's 15 becomes 17, and then you've got to get 20% growth each year.
Yeah. But I would just, if you go back to the slide with I think it was the next one.
This one?
No. The previous one. Oh yeah, this one, the drivers. So I would just this one. Yeah, I would say that there is still lack of LCC expansion, the low cost carriers expansion. So for example, just think of it. It's the low cost carriers share within the capacity, the overall capacity now in April is around 18% across the Central Asia. And if you compare it with other regions, this is not something to brag about.
Not. Yeah, I mean, globally,
it's about 35 to 40.
35. Yeah, it's about 35% globally. And actually, in some markets, if you look at Southeast Asia, many parts of Asia, South Asia as well, obviously with India, it's upwards of 60%, which to some extent tells you about the potential
yes, it is.
of the market to grow. And LCC works because it's low cost, it's effective, it
creates the market.
Yeah, it offers people who haven't traveled by air before a cost-effective means of getting from A to B and taking journeys that are in the zone of they wouldn't have traveled anyway, So the stimulation effect, I guess, that we see from low-cost carriers is what brings that explosive growth.
I think the interesting thing here is, you can only be a low-cost carrier if you've got an absolute obsession with cost and you've got them completely under control and you've got the lowest unit cost in the market. Now, some of the state-owned airlines in Central Asia will say that's them. They already have very low cost base. But the reality is someone can always come in and produce a lower unit cost and take the market. Notwithstanding, it is a very nationalistic part of the world. This is a market that is completely right for a pan-Central Asian low-cost carrier. A low-cost carrier that is got 3 or 4 multiple bases across the region, operating internationally and domestically, could have a phenomenal future.
And I guess
Flaristan has it. I mean, a bit. I mean, in Kazakhstan, it's the low-cost carriers' share of capacity is around 30%. Uzbekistan is just 3%, and Tajikistan is only 1%. But this is, and one of the reasons actually is, and we're getting to market liberalization, because it's close and we have the issue with regulations. So there's a lot of room for improvement. So the regulations how customs and how immigration works just don't let them to have turnaround time of 30 minutes, which is a common thing in Turkey or Europe or even Russia. So Uzbekistan is still lagging behind in terms of regulations. And in terms of liberalization, because to some extent, of course, the government would protect the national carriers, and they see it as a competition. From my point of view, competition is always good. I mean, a healthy competition is always leading you to growth, and especially in case of letting low-cost carriers enter the market, and we've seen it when Wizz Air entered the market, and when other low-cost carriers emerged in Central Asia. So there's still, and actually the airport costs are also quite high in Central Asia. So you have to be flexible here, and we're trying to, as an airport, we're trying to do whatever we can do from our side.
It's a tricky thing though, isn't it? The concept of liberalization leads to rapid growth, but actually opening the doors essentially, because the opportunity, right, is for, like John says, a sort of pan region carrier. If you replicated the AirAsia model in Central Asia, you can see that could be done in a really effective way. The extent to which
I agree.
There's a principle that kind of says let's open up ownership and liberalize the market to the extent to which everybody benefits from that rapid, fast-paced growth, versus the hybrid of that, I guess, is that you retain control. And we see that in lots of other markets, don't we, where carriers have to, the rules in India for a long time were so restrictive that you had to operate in the domestic market before you could pursue international growth. I think it's part of the journey. You know, there isn't a model that you can say, would it work more effectively if you opened the door and let an Asian or a European LCC in to enable and facilitate that growth versus doing it in the market. My sense is that in your market, it'll be a homegrown carrier that will have to be the starting point, I think.
But can a homegrown carrier realise the capital for such a venture?
Yeah, that's the challenge.
It's an expensive exercise. I mean, if you look at Fly Star, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. That's Aerostana.
I know where you're going.
Aerostana like it, and what they were looking at. Peter Foster was looking at his business, and the government was looking at where Aerostana were and were going, and it clearly dawned on them, wow, if we don't create a low-cost airline, someone else is going to do it, and better we do it and try to influence the market than let someone else come in and do it. Oh, hello, let's just swap a load of aircraft onto a different airline registration, put a new management team in and call it Fly Astana. So, there's more than one way that this is going to happen. It's the evolution, and in 10 years' time, there'll be a great story.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, I think if we look at, and this is just kind of top level, looking back at last year, capacity split by domestic and international across the region. You can see that story quite clearly, can you, in terms of the Fly Aerostan position venture. And obviously that's boosted by there being the big domestic market in Kazakhstan.
The other thing we know is, unless it's a very consolidated domestic market or it's a regulated domestic market, it's really hard for an airline to make a profit on domestic flying.
Yes, exactly. That is so true.
They're going to have to venture out and start doing some complementary international sectors to get some real cash.
But I think Kazakhstan, they're really doing a great job on that. I think they're either subsidize airlines, or yes, they give some benefits for domestic flights, and that's what drives domestic growth in Kazakhstan, I believe.
Yeah,
but I'm not 100% sure about
that.
Almost
like public service obligations. The government contributes to the cost of the operation because the infrastructure doesn't allow travel very effectively without air service.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a wee look at the airport landscape, because there's quite an interesting story here. So this is just top 10 airports in Central Asia, and we're looking at 2026 capacity and then back to 2017, so the kind of 10-year window. And delighted to see that Samarkand makes it into that table.
I'm looking at this and thinking Samarkand is the equivalent of Brighton in the Premier League, from nowhere to the top 10.
Thanks a lot for bringing that up.
Yeah, not that I'm basking in the glory of last night's wonderful result, but I think it's quite fascinating how you've managed to replicate the profile of Brighton. Well done.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. But a lot of work was put into the project. So it's the new airport started operations in 2022. So since then, we've had 4 years of consecutive growth. And it was higher in previous years. So just only in 2022, it was just around 500,000. In 2023, we served more than 1 million passengers. It was around 1 million, so that's twice growth. Then 1.3 last year, 1.5. So it levels down a little bit, but still the pace is really good. So as I said, and if you look around, something happens everywhere. It's either India, Pakistan, Russia, Ukraine, or the Middle East and Gulf. And but we have to be flexible, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be flexible. We're trying to explore new markets, and there are markets to explore, definitely, for Samarkand. And if you look at the international traffic, so Samarkand is actually within top 5 airports in Central Asia, within around, I think it's around 30 airports in Central Asia, overall international airports. So Samarkand is in top 5 for a number of international traffic.
I mean, you're a bit like an old car, aren't you, Dmitry, with spark plugs? You know, if one of them is not firing correctly, you've always got a market that is not quite firing as you want it to. When they suddenly all fire perfectly, I mean, you're going to be back into the aren't you? Everything is going to be coming your way. The Indian trader, the Chinese exporter, the Russian market, the the Turkey connections and connectivity to the world, and the Middle East, which is a growing market. But potentially in Central Asia is huge.
Yeah, Uzbekistan is obviously in a good position to become an international hub, Europe-Asia hub in particular. And it's always been, one of the goals of the government, and it fits good. But then, I mean, historically, with all the Silk Road history,
when the most recent crisis started, Edward Clayton, who's been on a couple of our webinars, his son flew from Kuala Lumpur back to London via Tashkent. And, the airfare was ridiculously cheap considering everyone was scrambling for a seat anywhere.
Well, this is surprising, but
as anything.
Yeah, I mean, usually Tashkent is a bit more expensive as a hub, but it saves you your time, definitely, and it's just a really good location. And this is why every time something happens, but as I mentioned, since 2020, there was always something. You're thinking, what are we going to do with all the stuff that's going on? Then you're thinking, what actually can we do? Because there are like external circumstances that you cannot, directly affect. But then you find some points that you can actually influence to, and everything that happens can be an opportunity for you to explore. So that's what we're trying to do, I think.
I think you can see, can't you, that and it often takes a crisis to focus attention on a different market, and I think we sort of, in the race to predict how the market might restructure or look different, there's a question mark, isn't there, about the possibility of the emergence of Central Asia as a hub to connect, or to not to replace, but to complement some of the existing hubs that have evolved in the Middle East. I think the reality is the Middle East hubs are way too big to fail, and
sure.
They have the market position and the market power in terms of their ability to bring back the connecting market as soon as people feel comfortable about doing that. But it does, if you're sitting in Tashkent or Almaty, and the kind of proposition of securing a bigger share of a connecting market, it's got to be something that's kind of escalated up the to-do list, isn't it?
Yeah, you haven't, in both of those cases, those destinations, those markets, those airlines don't really have a share of the market at the moment. As their surrounding regional markets grow, there will be more connectivity from mature markets to those points, and they're not going to be served by the Middle East carriers. Maybe Fly Dubai and some of the Qatar Airways stuff, because Dmitry's already got had Fly Dubai there. But you can see that there is going to be an opportunity for that to occur, and you don't need to be big.
Definitely.
You just need to be clever. You could be what Vienna was for Austrian Airlines. that was a very effective hub for many years into Eastern Europe.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we just, as I mentioned, we just need to do, like, a lot of stuff has to be done. I mean, structural and liberalization, just further liberalization of air travel. And if you will do it consequently, year by year, this is going to work definitely within some time frame.
I mean, if you look in Tashkent, I mean, there's a new airport being built, isn't there, Dmitry?
Yeah, 3.5 billion investments. Yeah, it's going to be huge, and with all the, I mean, a lot of stuff is happening in Central Asia. So there is definitely everyone sees this opportunity for hub operations via Central Asia, and this is. But this is not unified market. I mean, the Central Asia; those are like. It's this market competing at this markets competing at the same time, countries competing at the same time, and they are structurally different at the same time. So Kazakhstan's new terminal in Almaty and Astana investment and Almaty expansion, and there's a new terminal in Tashkent with Incheon, Sojitz, and the Vision Invest companies, the joint venture. Building new airport in Tashkent, and there's Uzbekistan Airways, who ordered around 20 787s, which is clearly showing the intentions. Yeah. And half of the aircraft orders are from Uzbek carriers, the current aircraft on orders. So there's going to be a huge fleet expansion. There's going to be a huge infrastructure expansion, and there just need to be like some small pieces also brought together, and that's going to work, in my opinion. I stay optimistic on that.
And you know, alongside that, you don't build a brand new airport terminal just for your national airline. You want to have all of those legacy prestige carriers and their, you know, tail fins from China, from Europe and other such places alongside those.
I think it's the balance of who can drive growth, though, isn't it? Because actually, if you look at, and I didn't include this in the deck, but if you look at aircraft orders by region, and this kind of proportion that the order book is of the existing fleet, I think in Central Asia, there's something like 105 aircraft on order. Against a fleet of 250 there.
240,
250. That proportion is significantly smaller than some of the other markets. Now, there are lots of reasons for that, not least significantly larger populations, a more mature market. But actually, the reality is that the aircraft that are on order for Central Asian-based carriers are only part of the story. You know, there will be growth that will come from non-domiciled carriers, the Middle East carriers.
Definitely.
Although European carriers have less ability in terms of their capacity for growth as well. So I think it's, you know, and maybe that's just where we are in the evolution of the region right now. And I think if we were looking at this in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, it would look quite different. I think the airline landscape will have matured, and there will be more confidence in terms of the potential of the market to grow in future. I think we're at the beginning of that.
Many non-domiciled airlines will be in their head offices looking at Central Asia saying, oh, this is interesting. What's happening here? But we don't need to be part of it yet.
It's just a lot of stuff has to be, you know, put together to make it work. It's not just you built a whole new airport, greenfield airport, and now it works out of nowhere. No, you have to. There's a lot of things that has to be done, and it's both national carriers and bringing international carriers, and what we're also missing here is that also other parties has to be involved. It's not only about airports and airlines. So there are a lot of other stakeholders who should
tourism
be
sector,
involved.
the hotel industry,
Yes,
chambers of commerce, conference. You know, it's all got to be brought together into one package, really, hasn't it?
there has to be a synergy, yes, and that will what will make it work better. Otherwise, it just will not. This is also one of the structural things that has to be changed.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the positive on that is there are lots of good examples outside of the region of where that's been done positively, and actually, you know, we've had a sort of run, haven't we, in the last decade of that kind of joined up thinking about nationally where a country wants to get to in terms of tourism targets. And there's I think there's a more enhanced understanding of what it takes to get to that, whether your target's aspirational or realistic is kind of it's almost a moot point. I think I think that's something we've seen in terms of the maturing of you know, how you deliver growth in terms of it has to be a joined up story with tourism, airport operators, airlines, the market, the drivers of the market, because it doesn't work otherwise. So there's opportunity, I think, for the countries and the airports in the region to work out what aspects of other markets that have either done it the right way or the wrong way, you know, how to incorporate that into their growth story. I think that's a positive, because the reality is, you know, yes, every market has its own kind of, you know, peculiarities and requirements and issues and constraints, but fundamentally, we know how markets grow, don't we? And you know, there's a right way and a wrong way to do that. I think the interesting thing from my perspective, and again, maybe this is just because we're kind of early in the growth story, is if we look at where growth, and we've sort of acknowledged this, haven't we? If we look at both Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, and this is just count of new routes by the destination region, and it's the change from 2019 to 2025. There's a kind of geographic constraint, isn't there? We're not really yet in growing beyond those neighbouring regions in terms of connectivity, and I guess that's just about the things that are underpinning growth in the market.
But it's, you know, it's part of the evolution of the market. Yeah, Deirdre, I mean, if you look at the European market, I think Samarkand is a great example of this. Dmitry, how many Turkish airline flights to Istanbul do you have a week now? It's got
10.
10. You know, and that's how the market is flowing at the moment. If you look at Tashkent, that's got 3-4 times daily. And it you know, that will grow to a point where another European airline sees an opportunity. But the biggest challenge for Central Asia is its geographic distance from Europe. I mean, it is a long haul sector.
It is.
And you know, I've done Tashkent, London, Heathrow, and 7 hours on an A321.
It's a long way.
It's well, it was a chance to revisit Russia, that was for sure.
I think it's interesting. I mean, this was just a snapshot of this is just Uzbekistan international connections back in 19. And
look at China
today. It's really interesting, isn't it, when you look at how growth has just happened across here, and then obviously across you know, across the region. It sometimes, you know, these they're of limited value, these network maps, but just really interesting to see, isn't it, how that density has occurred across those close by regions.
Yeah, it's a bit obvious for me. I mean, what happened, but still, it's so interesting on what really happened with many new Russian destinations opened, many new Russian services. China also, and China is increasing huge in Uzbekistan because they start to open their companies, they bring their own workers to work here, and you see this like expansion everywhere. And with the services to China also.
Yeah, it's one of those markets that very quietly creeps up on you, and suddenly, as you say, Dmitry, you look at a map and compare 7 years ago to now, and it's like, wow, where did that all come from? And none of these are by all means daily services. Some of these are maybe 2 a week.
Yeah, sure.
But they will grow
yeah.
to daily over time, and as there's more investment from China into Central Asia, there will be more flights with Chinese workers. I mean, it's replicating what they've done in Africa and other parts of the world.
Yeah, and there is also New York services, which is I think I believe that Uzbekistan is still the only Central Asian country that has direct U.S. services, and it's going to be increased this summer with the new airline entering the market for Tashkent, New York services.
Really?
And the Kanot Shark. I've seen the press release when
how to blow a couple of $1 million in a few months.
Yeah, maybe they will change their plans with the whole the fuel.
I was going to say, never a better time than the price of fuel to be doing something new.
Yeah.
The enduring appeal of the Big Apple. It doesn't go away, does it? There's population diaspora as well, isn't there?
Yeah, huge
in the
huge community.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit geeky, but I know it used to route through Riga, the Tashkent service.
Yeah.
With a 757. So this is modern technology now. Power of the new aircraft generations.
So, we're kind of almost out of time, unbelievably. I think. What's your kind of prognosis for the coming year to 18 months, Dmitry? What do you see as being maybe the biggest challenge for the region to overcome, or your kind of landscape in particular in Samarkand?
Well, to sum it up, we have a really strong fundamentals. So there's a growing population, rising incomes, and the tourism is expanding, and there is a significant investment in aviation infrastructure, and signals for fleet expansion. So Central Asia, it's not just a fast-growing aviation market now, it's entering a new phase where growth becomes maybe more selective, more competitive. And but we just need to, I would say, look at structural changes, better liberalization of the market, diversify, lower friction with better incentives and synergy. And so the opportunity is clearly there. I stay optimistic because, as I mentioned, we passed COVID, and there is uncertainty that you can feel from the going from the airlines, but it has always been since 2020, and it will go away, I'm pretty sure, and just demand is going to be there once again, and there is a clear path for further development for Central Asia.
I snigger at the irony of this situation. We're talking about a market with double-digit growth year on year, with maybe a short-term problem, and I can think most other places in the world that would kill for the opportunities that you're sitting on at the moment, and how
definitely
you're gonna be able to manage them all and continue to grow. It's an envious position. If you are a route development person working for an African airport at the moment, and you can get a visa to work in Central Asia, get there as quickly as you can.
Yeah, I think it's there's a layer of context, isn't there, about the optimism and excitement in the market, and I think, like you say, Dmitry, the airports and airlines in the region have sort of faced events before, and it's you know, is it even as much as a bump in the road? Maybe it's just a small pothole.
Yeah, it's an English pothole. It's about
well, no, because they're bad.
5 feet long and 10 feet deep. Yeah.
Yeah, they're bad. Well, listen, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Always
Big
great
pleasure
to have someone in a market who really understands and knows what's going on and what the drivers are in the market. Yeah, thanks, John, again for your insights and thoughts. I think we've kept it reasonably positive despite my best efforts. You can sign up to hear about upcoming webinars. We generally do these once a month, and there's always insightful commentary and content in OAG's blog as well. So you can also sign up for that by visiting the website. We will be back in about a month's time. Subject content to be discussed, but I think we probably can't escape talking about consolidation, what's happening in the industry, and what it all means. So watch this space, and we'll look forward to being with you on the next one. Thanks everybody for listening today.
Thank you. Good to see you, Dmitry.
Thanks.